How's everybody doing? We can't see you, so let's hear you. Yeah, because the spotlights are bearing down, you know?
We're so lucky we have so many relatives, otherwise there'd be nobody here. A lot of Italian people. All right, we don't have a moderator, do we?
Oh, what are we here?
What are we supposed to be talking about? Anybody have any idea? Whatever we want to talk
Whatever we
about?
feel like, all right, we can do that. Listen, Italians are known for talking a lot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
There won't be any breaks in this.
So we could talk a little bit, and then, you know, I'm sure you guys got some questions probably, right? You'd want to ask us, and we could just open up and have a conversation. It sound like a good plan? Yeah? All right.
I actually have a question, and this goes on for as long as we've been doing this. There's this ebb and flow of pinup art and then storytelling, and it never seems to be a long enough time of quality storytelling. There always seems to be that need to have the pinup issues. Does anybody have a preference to either or is storytelling still very important to everybody?
We agree.
All right, good. I had somebody called me, and I won't say who it was, and in a panicky voice said, I don't know how to tell a story, and I have a writer that is demanding me to tell a story. Can you give me a hand? And this was an experienced artist. And I didn't get angry or laugh or anything. I just thought it was so ironic that a person who's been in the business for that many years had trouble telling a story. And I thought that's what we're supposed to do right off the bat. And then the artwork is icing on the cake. But this guy is...
You had a good mentor.
That's a good point. I had a good mentor. I did. But
See, the thing is, you know, the generation of artists that GR and I come from is a school of where, you know, we were given a guideline, a blueprint for the story, but it really was up to the artist to direct it, pace it, and illustrate that story and bring it to life. And what has happened, you know, in the years as they've passed is writers have pretty much taken control of all of that, or attempted to. Right, JR and I certainly reject that kind of approach because it's a waste of our training of what we're able to do. But these days, a lot of writers and they give artists even the number of panels on page. They tell them even the contents of the page, where to put the camera. And so what has happened is a lot of these newer guys, they don't have the same muscles, you know, that we developed very early on. And so that's how you get to a guy like John's talking about, where you go, I don't know how to do this thing. And it's vital that we know how to do this thing. And I'll tell you why. Is what we do is visual, all right? And so what goes on that paper, we know what works, what doesn't work. A writer, he doesn't have the hours in the trenches that we have. So what might seem good in his head when he's writing it might not actually be good in the physical world on that paper. So yeah, it's a generational thing. And
we were fortunate enough to start off when plots were given to us, synopsis, and then we pasted out the story, thumbnailed it, so to speak, and then the writer would fill dialogue in according to the artwork. And I know I'm a little bit jaded because that's how I started off, and I got used to it that way. Now it really is a struggle with a writer who has never worked that way before. And you get painted into a corner sometimes. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, I'm older than all the writers I work with. And they kind of give me a little bit of creative license. And then they'll change dialogue. But I have to let them know I'm adding 2 or 3 pages to the end of a book because there's just not enough room. The writer recently gave me a description of a vignette that went on for about a full page, and it was multi-action, animation. I swear it was an animated panel, and I thought this was great, a full page this way. Then the next line was panel 2. So it took forever to describe one panel, and there wasn't enough room. So I wrote back and said, this is going to need an extra 2 pages, and they could not understand it. So we prefer to work from a plot. Being that as it may, we can work with scripts and work with them as they are, as if they're plots, and let the writer change the dialogue according to the artwork afterwards. So we're lucky enough to be experienced enough to have the writers work with us that way. Otherwise, I would probably be pulling my hair out.
Yeah, I already have. And when Scott Snyder and I started, you know, he came, you know, for that full script mentality. And I came from, you know, getting it done with a phone call with Todd McFarlane on the phone going, you know, 3 pages, Sam and Twitch, they'll be talking about this, you know, don't care where they are, and this is the tone of the conversation, and at some point maybe Sam will say this, you know, and so, and we illustrated based on that, and it was, as John pointed out, would be dialogue after. And when I started working with Scott, you know, my printer almost burnt out, you know, I'm certain I changed the ink cartridges twice, and the paper tray like 5 times when I was printing out his first script to me. And I said to him, Scott, you know, I just need the important words. And he goes, all the words are important. And I said, well, that's really not true. So, but anyway.
That's 100% accurate. The difference between writers that over describe things is a stack of pages, maybe 50 sheets. And then the other extreme is I worked with John Byrne on Iron Man, and he gave me 2 sheets.
Right.
The beginning and the end, he said, just make sure you get to this point. There's 18 pages in between. Get to this point where I can do this and have fun. And that's basically what it was, because he was a writer. He was an artist first. That might be an extreme on both ends, but he's right. Sometimes writers will give you so much that it might stunt your creativity, because the power of suggestion is in your mind. And while the majority of their ideas are quality, they don't have a visual sense to them all the time. And it's a struggle. It really is.
I'll give you a funny story. Well, it's funny to me. It's probably not funny to Grant Morrison. But I did a story with Grant Morrison back in the day when I was working on, you know, Tom McFarlane's Spawn. And so I get the FedEx package with his script. And along with that script is a stack of, you know, thumbnail drawings. He had it all drawn out, how he wanted it to look. And as soon as I realized what that was, I immediately shot it to the trash, you know, because as John said, you know, it gets in and it paints into your head and changes your vision. And so, you know, Grant, I don't know how much time he spent on it, but it took me like 3 seconds to throw it away, you know. And so, and that's kind of been like my tale to help break writers who try and come and like tell me something like, you know, Robert Kirkman, it was something as simple as he goes, you know, I see this as all vertical panels. Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change that
God.
Just to break you.
That is absolutely a pet peeve of mine. Just don't tell me how to shape the panels.
Yeah, so.
And I understand that there's no malice in it. It's almost part of their thought process. But it really does stunt the creativity when somebody puts a suggestion in there. That's not their job to put a suggestion in. I can work with, if they're going to give me dialogue, I can go by the context of dialogue. But don't add, and I see this as this kind of panel, with these other panels coming right after it. And I go into the room with the rubber room and I scream a primal scream and then go back to work.
What I like to say is, the day you can tell me how to do the panels is the day I can tell you what to stuff inside those balloons, right? And so, you know, it's a very much a team effort to bring you the books that we bring you all the time. And I see it as the writers are like the screenplay writing guys, and we're the film directors. We're the choreographers. We you know, just like you have fight choreographers in film. You know, we do that. You know, we're the lighting guys. We're the guys who go, here's where the light's going to be. We do all that. We're the visual end of things.
Well, I was lucky enough. It's funny. We have the extremes. We're talking about extremes. I worked with Neil Gaiman on the Eternals, and he proactively said to me, I know what you can do, and I'm going to send you scripts, but don't feel that you have to abide by every single letter of what I give you. He says, send me what you do, and then I will adjust on the fly. This is Neil Gaiman. If he can do that, and regardless of the size of his talent and his ego, for him to understand that is a testament to him. Frank Miller did the same thing, because Frank was an artist first. But there are certain writers that they don't need to feel in so much control. They can work around what you give them. Now, if either one of us wasn't as experienced as we are in telling stories, it would be a difference. If it was a young, inexperienced artist, I can understand having to help them out. But it's a struggle, and especially you don't want to piss off your writer right off the bat. You have to work with them and explain. So phone calls, explanations, I can do this, I can do that. You don't need, just like you said, you don't need to give me all of this explanation. I know what to do, just I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and then you can change the dialogue according to the artwork.
My joke to Scott Snyder all the time is, you know, you don't get paid by the word. You know, you get the same amount purse, you know, by giving me less.
It looks, everything you guys work on is outstanding. So
oh, thanks, man.
The ends justify the means.
And I got to tell you, you know, this is the longest time I've had to interact with JR ever, and he's one of my biggest influences in heroes. And here's something you may not know is John's father is actually the guy who pushed for me to get work back in the day for Marvel Comics. He was the art director of Marvel Comics, and I had gone through a lot of editors who were, you know, trying to guide me along the path. And when I got to a certain level, it was John Romita Sr. who went, you know what, I'm going to get you work. And he was the one bringing my stuff to the offices of the other editors. So I'm sort of like family, at least the way I'm painting it in my head.
If your last name didn't end in a wow. If your name was Capullo or something like that, he might have hesitated.
Yeah, but he was a very, very kind man and a wonderful person. So anyway, that's a little bit about the working process, and you probably know enough about, you know, how we started. Is there anything you want us to talk about, or you want to ask us?
Any questions? Yes, you have to scream nice and loud, or we'll repeat the question.
You guys have been in the industry for a long time. Since you guys have been in the industry for a while now, what have you like to stay current, to be the top artist that you guys are today? Like, if you look back, your art has changed from where it was when you started to it is today. Is that just natural improvement, or are you looking at what new artists are doing to stay current? Or like, what's that process like?
Right. Okay, I'll go first. I mean, I have my root guys that inspired me when I wanted to do this, and John Romita Jr. is one of those guys who I look to. And when I took over Quasar, I was stealing what he had done with a character called Starbrand. So I've been stealing from JR.
Whoa. You went by Starbrand?
Yeah, he was a long blonde-haired guy.
Still thriving?
So,
Fringe.
yeah, he was my blueprint though for Quasar, really. And so anyway, but you know, you develop your style as it goes, you know, and at some point, you know, you sort of become you. And for me personally, I'm always trying to grow. Whereas, you know, you look at a guy like Jim Lee, and Jim Lee pretty much looked like Jim Lee for a long time, you know. And the other thing I personally try and do is to kind of adapt my style to whatever the title would be. For instance, if you look at my work on Spawn, and then you hired me to do Archie or Barbie, I certainly couldn't use that style to illustrate those books. It just wouldn't fit, it wouldn't be appropriate. And as far as looking at other artists to stay current, I do not do that. I'm very aware of all the powerful, talented people that are out there that when I do come across the work, I go, wow, that's amazing, you know. The talent, the level of talent out there now is just staggering. But I don't look at it because I don't want to be influenced by it, and I don't want to unintentionally lift something from them. I feel like at this point in my career, I kind of know what I'm doing, and I focus only on my art. And the fact that you guys like it is fantastic. I just try and do my very best and pay close attention to the vision that these stories that I'm reading are putting into my head, and that's the way I do it. So no, I don't look at the new guys and gals, but there are a lot of fantastic, talented people out.
I was going to say that I actually do look at other artists only because, as part of reference for something I haven't worked on, especially with Superman, I had to go through a whole slew of artists for me. I had to look at his work when I was doing the first time I was doing Batman in the Superman issue. So that kind of happenstance allows me to look at the other artists. But I was familiar with his work anyway. The question you had was good. There's a natural progression. If you don't improve when you work every day for 12 hours a day for about 300 days a year, if you don't improve, then there's something wrong, because you're doing it, it's like exercise, it's like anything else, playing a piano. You have to get better, naturally. If you're not, then there's something wrong. As far as changing of styles, I'm not good enough or smart enough to attempt a style change. Other than when I did Kick-Ass, I altered it. I didn't put any black fields in the art. I wanted it to look different than the regular work I did. So all I did was eliminate dark shading and black fields, and it was all line work. And now I'm doing something called Smuggy and Bimbo, which is all pencil and charcoal and smudging, and it's a completely different look. That's not necessarily a style change, it's a look change for the sake of something different, but I'm not good enough to consciously change my style, whereas progression has allowed things to change a little bit, and I call it deadline style. Whatever comes out on time, I accept it. Sometimes not that good. You lost one.
Check. Okay.
Battery died.
Battery died. Okay. Anyway, JR makes that joke about deadline style. Okay. But I'm here to tell you, as a professional, every single panel that this man puts on every single page is just a perfect composition, and his sense of storytelling and pacing is second to none. And I tell you, I don't look at the new artists, but I will tell you that I do have JR's books by my side, and if I'm ever feeling like dry or whatever, you know, I have the books, and I'll look at them in the morning, get charged up by them. So there you go. And this is a fact. Yeah, I look at your stuff to, if I'm feeling like, geez, I just don't feel it today, I pull out my JR, I flip through it, and I just go, God, it's just so awesome. Everything's perfect. Everything's perfect. How does he do it? I still don't know how to do it. I don't want to know how to do it. I already feel insecure enough. You know, but
greed. Gordon Gekko said it right. Greed is good.
yeah. No, it's a brilliant man. So I use JR as inspiration. Anybody else? Who we got? Right here.
Do you guys actually prefer to draw like through the tablet, through the computer, or do you guys prefer the pencil and paper and that still? Which one do you prefer?
Fortunately, I still have a hammer and chisel and a big piece of. I'm pencil, paper, eraser, especially the eraser. I actually did some work with Disney for 2 of their films, and they wanted me to work on a tablet, and I struggled a little bit. I really did, because it's just something I wasn't used to, and everybody was collectively saying the same thing. That's where we're headed. Well, I'll just wait 10 more years, and then you can do whatever the hell you want, as long as I can use pencil, paper, and eraser. It's the best thing for me, because I'm comfortable with it, whether it's right or not. I don't know.
I pencil traditionally, same as JR. I've tried to do some stuff digitally, and I think there's something a little that gets lost in translation, and I don't have as much control. I also prefer to ink traditionally, but when I've inked things, ink covers in particular, and it's been in a deadline crunch, I've done it digitally and not been too disappointed. Has some advantages because you can quickly get some textures that are a little bit.
You mean digital inks?
Yeah, digital inks.
I don't think I've had that chance yet.
I'm
looking forward to trying.
I have tried that, and the great thing is, you know, there's so many filters that can give you all kinds of textures. So instead of like the old school where you get maybe some white out in the toothbrush and do some splatter, it's very easy to control those effects and get them just how you want. And so it can be quicker. Also, you trap an area and just click a button and it's black. There's no painting in that huge area. But like that piece back there, that's digital painting that I did using Corel Painter, which is very good at imitating oil paints and a lot of other media. So anyway, but I'm old school, prefer Danny Mickey's prefers old school. He's inking me on my pencil boards, and yeah, so there's us. Anybody else?
It's a young man straight ahead. Should have brought suntan lotion.
How do you feel about the new DC and direction they're going with Batman and Superman?
Well, change is good. I'm not one of these guys who holds on to, you know, I like it this way, because if everything stayed the same, right, it'd be stagnant, and stagnant sucks. So I'm anxious to see where we go.
They got me on.
Okay.
No dancing. The good thing about Superman is what I did not expect, and that was that they allowed us to make some big changes to the character. And it did not start with an intention the way we thought it would. The addition of his new power blew up into something that's now going to expand into a full 4 titles. So we really looked into it, but what I'm happy is that the DC guys allowed us to make some really drastic changes to the character that the suits in Burbank said was not supposed to happen. So that's a nice thing with Superman. It's going to be a big change. And everybody will roll their eyes whenever you say, we're doing big things and changes to Superman, the 80-year-old character. This really is pretty drastic, and it's quality. And there might be some eye rolling, but it's better than that. It's much better than that.
Anybody else? Question? Oh, yeah, Joe.
So you were just talking about changes and how, you know, they're good and all that. My question is, if you guys had complete, you know, freedom to change one thing about any character you would want, what would you change?
That's a big question. I don't know that I have an answer. Do you have an answer?
Yeah, get rid of that stupid forelock and Clark Kent's haircut. That's just...
I like it!
Buzz that bitch right out.
It's a big S.
And I'll tell you why. Because Lois Lane's haircut is exactly the same as Clark Kent's haircut. And I did a panel with the two of them just before I got here. And the two of them were close talking to each other. And their hair is just, looks like it's the same hair. It's annoying. And now somebody's going to say, Romita doesn't know how to draw anybody's hair. It's not my fault. Lois Lane has exactly the same hair color, the same hairstyle. So we've remedied that.
I wonder what happens when they kiss.
It's gonna just.
Hey, our hair, it's like braces. Hey! Anybody else? Questions? Come on, there's got to be something. Yeah.
Kind of a weird question, but who or what has given your inspiration to give you what you have? Because I don't see anything resembling similar, but not exactly. Like, you can tell it's a Capullo or a Romita. Like, you can tell. What gives you your inspiration for that separation?
Well, that's a good question. It's a conscious effort in my mind to try to do something I haven't done before almost every day. And it fails 99% of the time, because if you think about the amount of time we've been working, and then you consider how many people have been before us, there are also the amount of people that are working at the same time as us. It's difficult to come up with anything. It's like coming up with a new melody. How do you come up with a new melody in music? It's the same struggle, but it still means you should strive to come up with something different. Different angles, different anything. Whether or not it manifests itself, I don't know, but I'm making an effort to try to do something different. What's good about that is every time I mess something up, I say, I did that on purpose, trying to do something different. It's a built-in excuse maker, because I run out of dead grandparents.
One of the things that gives you individuality is it's like, all right, you've got a lot of different movie directors, right? And you could give every director the exact same story, and yet every movie will come out looking different. Same as you can put into a room a bunch of artists and tell them to draw a particular subject matter, and those artists will all have a drawing of that very same object, but it'll all look differently. What causes that to happen? Well, I think it's an amalgamation of all of who you are from all your life experiences and how you feel and what your influence have been, and it all just comes together and it goes into your blender and it comes out the way that it does. So there's that. And then there's a little bit that I try and intentionally do, and that's this. Just like any product has, any brand has something specific, like the Nike swoosh, whatever, right? Let's use that just as an example, right? So it's easily recognizable. If you can take some little nicky tidbit that is so recognizable as being your style, I think that goes a long way. And I've done it, and I get a lot of compliments going, Meg, I don't know what, I love the way you do noses. Right? And I put a little Nike swish, and it's a very stylized thing, but it makes it recognizable. And now if other people do your nose that way, they go, oh, they're doing the Capullo nose, right? Okay, so part of it is a conscious effort to do something that sets you apart. Whether it was McFarlane with the poses he did with Spider-Man or whatever, you try and come up with, something that just is a little bit different than the other guy's doing.
There's another way of looking at this that we talked a few minutes ago about storytelling. If you're a good storyteller, or you really have control over telling the story, the sequential storytelling, you actually work backwards, as opposed to the artists that start off drawing the art. You start telling a story, and then you come up with scenarios or images or designs that a lot of people won't do. For instance, pulling back and setting up a scene, no matter how far back you pull, in the middle of the most pin-up worthy battle, where everybody goes for their money shot, which is this gigantic pin-up of somebody's clocking somebody across the chin. Well, that's been done 1 trillion times. So try pulling back the way a director would in a film, and a muted thud of somebody getting belted across the face. You use the storytelling to cause you to do something different. I saw a movie once a million years ago called The Big Country with Gregory Peck and Charlton Heston beating the snot out of each other. Typical schlocky fight from 1960s, 50s. But the point is, the director had the close-ups, and then there was a pullback, and they were out in the middle of a distant field, beating the shit out of each other, and all you heard was a muted thud. And I said, this is great. And the movie was called The Big Country, so it served several purposes. And if you throw that little bit of a tool into your belt, it separates you from the other artists, and it gives you, and it's not that you're drawing a different image per se, You're just taking a different angle on it. That's
Choices.
where storytelling comes into hand.
It's your choices. So,
Good question.
on my way. Anybody else? See, this is why I always bring these. These are brutal. When I played a band, I always had these.
Hey JR, I got the copy of A Moment of Silence. What's your perception of heroes and evil since that time? Has that changed?
Yeah, it did change quite a bit for everybody as well as me. Is that you don't need supernatural to come up with evil, and we certainly experienced that. And the friends and the families that were affected by that, those that I knew. One of my aunts got out twice, '93 and 2001. She ran down the stairs. So there's always an attachment. One of my friends lost 40 of his firefighter friends. There's always something like that that changes everything. And on a moral scale, yes, the answer is yes, it changes everything. But there's always somebody that's been worse off than what we went through, so I can't stand on any of this. But yeah, it did. It changed everything. It changed me in every way possible. Absolutely. We're talking about 9/11, of course. I can't open that book, by the way. Spider-Man 36. I haven't opened it since it got printed.
I feel bad asking this little powder puff question after that one, but
No, it's okay.
I know that, John, you've worked on several different characters, several different books, and you've kind of touched them all on Marvel, and Greg, you've had this long run on Batman, long run on Spawn. My question to both of you is, do you prefer long extended runs on your book where you get the time to really put your mark and put your stamp on a book, or would you prefer to move on to the next thing and try something new after 6, 12 issues?
Go ahead.
Well, for me, I hate looking at my first issue of Batman. And I don't like the first issue I did of Spawn. For me, and some artists come out of the gate strong as soon as they pick up the book, and that's not me. It takes me a while to get into the book, to get intimate with the characters and the environment, and because I'll tell you this. Years ago, when I was trying to get into Marvel Comics, right? One of the submissions I had was of Thor, and the editor who looked at this, who was one of the toughest guys, Larry Hama, he looked at that and he goes, "This is not Thor. This is a guy dressed as Thor, just flying." And I didn't understand what he meant. He goes, "Because Thor flies a certain way, right? Superman flies a certain way and all this, right?" And so what he was trying to tell me is every character has their personality, just like we all have our personality, right? And so for me, it takes a while to get so intimate with those characters that I go, they would stand like this, they would use these gestures, they would tilt their head this way, they would use these expressions and so on. And so for me, it takes a while. So to me, it's great to stay on a book a little bit longer, because the longer I'm on it, the easier it becomes, because they tell me. The characters tell me how they want to be portrayed, and I just simply listen. And that's the way. So I like to stay on for a little while.
I agree with everything he said. However, I've done both. I've had short runs and I've had long runs. But everything he said is true. You get used to the character. I just got out of referencing every character in Superman's universe, where I had reference on everybody in front of me, because there were so many different artists' versions of them. And I just got used to the way they look, because I've had a run where a certain amount of issues has a distinguished look. But I got hate mail when I first started doing it. It didn't look anything like what people wanted. And it took a little while to get used to it. And that was just from family members. But everything he says is correct, and I've done both, short runs and long runs. I prefer longer runs, actually. But by happenstance in businesses, guys in suits change everything.
No, I just want to talk about reference. Neil Adams had said he would use photos on a lot of things, and tracing. For an artist, we take it in a different way, where it's that we're trying not to trace or anything else in all forms. I just want to understand how Neil Adams, and you guys are not him, but what do you do as an artist and take photos, ops, and everything else? How do you guys do that?
Do we go first or you want to go first?
I prefer not to use photographs, because they're staid and almost restrictive. But if you're as talented as Neil Adams, I'd be amazed to find out that he uses photographic reference other than reference, not to actually trace. He might have been exaggerating. I've never heard of him tracing anything. He's such a brilliant artist, I don't think he ever needed to trace. But doesn't mean he doesn't use photographic reference as a tool. And a lot of guys do that, and there are a lot of people that, and you can see that they use photographs, and they literally will trace. There's something very static and staid and dead to me, where you use photographs too much. Photographic reference is great, but you can see in the middle of an image, in the middle of a vignette of a story, there's a perfect pose of a female with her body parts shown in all different directions. You can tell when it's thrown in there, for whatever reason, the artist can't get through that moment. And I think that's a mistake. But then again, I don't know what the artist is thinking at that moment. I prefer not to use photographic reference in that way, just as a tool to the reference fashion or building reference, anything like that.
I think one of the things you're trying to say is, because when you're learning to become an artist, you know, you are trying to move away from, you know, being dependent on photographs. But you also, I did a lot of life drawing and a lot of drawing of photographs, not tracing them, but drawing as if, you know, I'm looking at it in real life, but I don't have access to it, so I'm using the photograph to draw. Okay, and I agree with everything John said. There's something that's just lifeless when you trace. So I definitely don't trace at all, and I don't need to look at photos or anything for, you know, anatomy and the way a body looks in motion and all, because I've done all my homework and I've got a lot of practice. Now some guys are using, you know, Google SketchUp. Google SketchUp is an app where you can look at objects and, you know, get them the angle you want. And a lot of these guys are constructing entire scenes, printing those out and tracing them. To me, it's far more trouble than it's worth. I'm never going to get it to be exactly as I envision in my head when I'm drawing it. So, but here's the way I still will use something. For instance, I have to draw the interior of an ambulance. Well, you know, I might have been inside an ambulance once or twice, but I don't have it committed to memory. So obviously I have to, if I want it to be authentic and convincing, I have to find a photograph of the interior of an ambulance, right? And so as John said, you use these as tools, right, to give something convincing. People go, Greg, you use photographs for your buildings. How do you draw the buildings? I go, well, I'm sure I'm messing up and combining all kinds of architecture that don't belong together, but they're all just bits and pieces of buildings that I've seen in my head, and I just push them together because I go, I'd like that shape to be there, and I think this shape would look good over here.
It's a design set, yeah, absolutely. Because if you take a photograph of the inside of that ambulance, and that makes you draw a panel to that photograph, you lose the spontaneity. So you take that photograph of the inside of the ambulance, and you design it as you need it for that panel. Same thing with architecture, same thing with buildings. He's exactly right.
All right. So I have found one way recently, you know, because I've always rejected Google SketchUp, all right? But I do have an iPad that sits next to me, so I Google images, as I just said, if I need to see an interior of an ambulance or something. Okay, so, but one final way that I got the Google SketchUp, I can't use it the way other guys can do it, but I use it just the same way as I use the Google search for images. What I'll do is I'll go, all right, I need to see an ambulance, and now I have the luxury of being able to spin it around different angles, and so I don't have to extrapolate. Of course, you know, I can extrapolate, but why bother if I could just go, here it is from this angle, no second guessing, and so I can draw and go, here's where all that stuff is, boom. And so I'm not tracing, but I'm using that as a tool to give me information that I needed to give you a convincing portrayal of whatever it may be. You know, fighter jet, for instance. Don't have fighter jets committed to my, what's an F-15 look like, Greg? I don't know. I got like a rough idea, but you know, I need to get a real F-15 to look at it so I can really sell it, you know?
Now, this is funny how much the internet and Google search and everything has helped us. Before there was the internet and Google search, I used to spend hours a week at a bookstore ripping apart magazines. I have a morgue. We had morgues back then, which is an immense file of every photograph from every newspaper you ever needed. Every time you saw something, you're out with a couple of friends and there's a magazine lying around. Can I have this? Whoosh, you pull it out, you put it in your pocket, and you put it in your file. Now it's Google. And you just print it out, and I go through paper and ink like a maniac. But you still need to be able to take from that and do something spontaneous with it.
You don't let the photograph rule you. You rule the photograph.
There you go. Well said.
And I'll tell you something based on what John just said, is I was going through a closet and I found this big stack, I mean, it was this fat of Xeroxes, 8 by 10 Xeroxes of cityscapes. And I go, wow, somebody at Marvel, and it was given to from Marvel, from an editor. And I go, wow, I don't remember them giving this to me. And it was, then I found a note buried inside that said it was to Todd McFarlane, because he was getting involved with Spider-Man, and going, and there's going to be more to come. And I mean, so Todd just doesn't care about any of that stuff, so he just goes, here, Greg, you can have all this. They also gave me this one on guns. Here, you can have this. So, but anyway, that's the old school way.
Well, the old school way ended up helping me. Just like you said, I found a stack of stuff from my first attempt at referencing the 70s, because I was in the 70s at the time. So I was getting modern fashion 40 years ago. It was for an artist, I think it was for John Buscema, I forgot what it was. Well, I'm doing a series called Schmuggy and Bimbo with Howard Chaykin. And it takes place in the early 70s. And all of the politics that's involved, but it's a little bit of fantasy. So I need reference on the 70s, fashion, hair. It's god awful. I cannot believe I had any link to that. Although I look okay. So I took all this reference and I had it. I didn't have to Google. I did end up Google searching because he needed a Cadillac limousine in a certain spot, and we needed, I think, Vincent's Clam Bar in Little Italy. It takes place in there. So little things like that, you need specific reference. But I had a stack of stuff from the 70s that even smelled bad. That's how awful it was. The outfits, oh my God, just watch a rerun of a bad 70s show, and that's what you got. So fortunately, I had that stack of stuff from the 70s, and it worked out to my advantage.
Anybody else? Yeah, back there.
I'm just wondering, are you doing anything create your own? Are you guys walking DC right now? How do you do anything like specifically like Creep? I've heard rumors that you might bring it back.
I was actually writing the third arc of the Creech before I took over Batman, and I would love to bring it back, and I plan to bring it back at some point. Right now, you know, I don't have any extra time on my hands, right, to draw it. I'd like to do it, and DC knows I'd like to do it, and where that slots in, who knows. You know, I still got a little road left on my contract to draw Batman on a monthly basis, and what happens after that, I guess we're still figuring it out, you know, but I would love to do that. John?
Yeah, fortunately, I'm allowed to play with some creator-own ideas, and I'm working on one that I came up with based on two guys that grew up with my parents, and their names were Schmuggy and Bimbo. And they are as colorful as their names. Fortunately, they've long since passed, but I come up with an idea, and I gave the treatment to Howard Chaykin, and he loved the idea, and he moved the times up to the 70s instead of back in the 40s. And it's creator-own. I started penciling it, and it's very labor-intensive, but there's something about getting a full day's work of Superman in, and then about 8 o'clock, before you start to run out of gas, you do a couple of hours of your own stuff, and you're suddenly invigorated, and you're working until midnight or 1 in the morning because you work, and on the weekends you work on creator-own. It's not that it's better work, it's just a complete departure, and it's fun, and it's grimy, and it's sometimes foul and violent, and I'm loving it. Well, I did Kick-Ass that way, basically, and now this is my own that I came up with, and the two guys are very interesting looking characters. I'm really excited about it.
Wondering if your family supported your first.
I couldn't hear it.
Did our families support our decision to become artists?
No. Wow. No, my father did not want me to, well, he didn't mind me being an artist. He just thought being a cartoonist was a mistake. And I was a teenager, and how often do you really listen to your parents when you're a teenager? So I ignored his quest to get away from comics. And I did get encouragement for art, but not necessarily for cartooning. He thought it was a mistake. I think he might still think it's a mistake. I don't know.
Do you feel like it's a mistake?
Huh?
Do you feel like it was a mistake?
No, it was not a mistake. I still love every minute of it. It's the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
In my case, you know, I wouldn't say they discouraged it at all, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it was encouraged. But when I did commit to wanting to become serious about it, I said to my mom, I want to quit my job. I was a bellhop, I think. And I just want to, sponge off you for a year. Just live at home and just I'll practice my art, and I'll hone my skills, and she allowed me to do that. And
oh, what a woman! Where is she?
well, now she's half gone. Unfortunately, she's old, but that's okay. It mellowed her out. She was an ass beater.
There's a real good way to look at this. Is that we are cartoonists, but we're artists. And here's the good thing: is I told my wife that there's a certain amount of not panic or fear of not being a deadline artist anymore. It's well, what happens when I want to retire? She said to me, my wife's brilliant. She said, well, just get rid of deadlines and then continue to be an artist. And it's funny that I didn't think of it that way because, and I'll tell you why I thought of it as being an end. Because my father retired when he was 66, and as brilliant an artist overall as he is, he did not ever Jones to be an artist anymore. He just didn't care. It was a job. He came from the Depression. He was a Depression baby, where it was a job to put food on the table, literally. And when he was done with it, he was fed up with being an artist, which is such a shame, because he's a brilliant artist. Fortunately, we can still paint till we're in our wheelchairs. And I think there's a mindset that says I may be done with deadlines, but I can still make fun of people with paintings instead of illustrations.
I will tell you, it wasn't a family member, but I had a close friend, and I was always drawing. I would get in trouble in school for drawing. I get in trouble at work for drawing, and everybody was on me about it. And I knew from the time I was 8 years old that I wanted to draw comics. I either wanted to draw for Mad Magazine or I wanted to draw for superhero comics. One way or another, that was going to happen. I wanted that for my life. And I had my friend's father, a very pragmatic guy, put his arm around me. Greg, no, you don't want to do this. Get a good job, respectable job. Do a little caricature work on the side, family members and stuff. Make bucks on the side. Okay, well, I've had a very blessed career, and it's been lucrative, and I have a very nice big home, and he came to visit me. Greg, I'm very glad you never took my advice. Anybody else? Have we tapped you all out already?
This lady in the nice outfit's got a question.
Where are we going?
Half-hearted hand raise.
Ivy? All right, Ivy.
Okay, redesigns. Are there any characters that you would like to redesign, or are there any characters that you've worked on that have been redesigned? What are your opinions?
This is a great question, and I'll do this quickly. I had to do Mephisto when I was doing Daredevil. And Mephisto is the devil. So I took reference from the pre-existing character, and he had a leotard set of pants on and a cape. Somehow the devil doesn't dress up. So I redesigned it. Went out, got drunk one night, and did some illustrations and come up with a very demonic-looking character. As far as what character I would like to do as my own is Doctor Strange. I haven't done them, and I want to do them. If I ever get a chance to do it, I would do it.
I haven't thought about any ones that I'd like to redesign, but I've had good fortune to redesign. When I was on X-Force, I got to redesign all the X-Force costumes. When I got on Spawn, I got to redesign Spawn. When I'm Batman, and got to do 0-year Batman, and now I'm doing the Gordon one. So I'm not hungering for it, because it's but that I've been scratched already a little bit. So anybody else? Yeah.
What is your favorite storyline or piece that you guys have illustrated for?
We've ever worked on or read. My favorite run of anything has been Man Without Fear, Daredevil, with Frank Miller.
Which was brilliant. It was very brilliant. Yes. Frank Miller's another one of my major heroes, And so you didn't mean the stuff that we worked on. That we did work on. Okay. The stuff that I work on, I don't like it all.
And the book that I've been looking at, it's awfully good stretch of stuff.
Thanks, man. I don't know. I mean, I've wanted to do this so bad for so long that I'm just happy that I'm doing it. I had a ball when I was on X-Force. I had a ball on Quasars, my first full-time book. And I'm very satisfied with what I'm doing now at Scott. I'm a lucky guy, and whatever you guys like the most, I mean, that's fantastic. I had a great deal of fun working on Spawn. I will say probably that's the most fun I had, even more than Batman. Even though we're at the top and we're producing good work and the fans are eating it up, the way that Todd and I produced those comics give me the fondest memories. It was like two little kids who would get together on the telephone, get all excited, giggling about what we could do in the story, month after month. And with just so much freedom to do whatever I want, it was literally the closest I ever was to being the little 8-year-old who wanted to draw comics. And so I would say that's the most fun I recall having is my Spawn era. But I'm certainly enjoying the success and grateful for everybody supporting the Batman stuff now. Thank you.
That's damn good stuff.
Anybody else? Right over here. Okay.
Has there ever been a time where you guys just were completely stumped on what to draw? Our writers have learned just about all the time. There's been a time where, even though I have good direction from my writers, I have no idea what to do. You know, like with Batman, there's so many times that it's been the Batgate investigating the crime. How do I make this different? Even what do I want to do to add a little bit of creativity of my own?
I haven't had any block in quite a while because I have.
Jeez,
I have
can't you lie?
I have a great incentive. It's the mortgage payment. Every time it shows up, oh shit, oh God, I'm in trouble if I don't get this done. No, I'm lucky that I have a few blocks. They're not blocks per se. They're maybe it's not happening today, so I'll rough out instead of tight pencils. It depends. I have ways of getting around it. If I haven't painted myself into a corner in a long time, so I get backdoor stuff. I'll rough out a whole book if my pencils are not cut. I've had days where it just doesn't look good, and I'll rough out a whole book. And there's ways to get around it, and then eventually, the mortgage payment comes in the mail. Excuse me, the mortgage invoice.
Yeah. The thing is, you can't be inspired all the time. It's impossible, right? And so in those times when you're not inspired, do something fresh and new and a different, cool way of doing something you've done countless of times before. That's when your experience comes into play, right? Because you know there are things that work. There's actually the 22 panels that always work by Wally Wood, right? So there's that. So when you do have those rough spots, it's almost like, you know, you could also take this approach, stepping back, wait until, you know, you're on fire again. And you could also, you know, if the deadline clock is really ticking, you know, that kind of time where you just got to go, you know what, this might not be the most inspired thing, but it's technically sound and it works. It won't be the thing that you point to and go someday, oh, remember that page I did there. But all the people who like it will accept it because it's technically sound. So when I'm at those points, I use a little bit of the experience to stand on that goes, I know this stuff works. I wish I come up with something a little brighter than this, but this is what I got. 5 o'clock time to send the last pages. Anybody?
Right next to him, he had another question.
What's your opinion on cinematic adaptations of comic books and their changes they make to them? Like, say, Gotham, that completely changed all the origin stories but gave it a fresh, new thing.
You know, I don't watch a lot of that stuff, but so I don't have a solid opinion on it, other than the fact that anytime you get our comic material and push it in front of somebody's face in another avenue that they might have never seen this stuff, I think it's a good thing. Because it might get their curiosity up enough to where they go, oh, I like this stuff. Let me see if I can find more about this. And they might get to the comic book. So I'm all for the movies and the TVs and the animated stuff. Any way necessary to get it in front of the public's eyes, I'm all for it.
It is an interesting little conversation I had with Bob Layton yesterday about he had a chance to get something developed. And they took his idea, had no idea what he had done. He took the name of it and started running with it. And he said, I was excited about it being developed, but when I realized what they were doing had no bearing on what I had given them, he says, I got mad. Well, we have come up to the point where they're taking our ideas. You gotta accept that. And if they run in a different direction, any screenplay writer probably can say the same thing, that they've taken their screenplay and the director has gone in such a wacky direction that there's been some kind of angst between the two. It's a director's vision, or the producer's vision, or the studio's vision, not always the creator's vision. Whatever pays the mortgage.
You guys just talked about redesigns a little bit, and John, I know that you recently tweaked Superman's costume a little bit.
What do you do with Superman's costume?
Well, my
a couple
question.
of S's and a red cape.
The gloves are pretty cool.
Yeah. I actually did suggest gloves, and they got very mad at me. I said, why? Hosey's whole body's covered up. Want to put him in shorts? No, you can't do that.
So I guess you just answered my question, which was, did that come from you? Did that redesign, was that your idea? And did you ever consider putting the trunks back on him?
No, the trunks are gone. Ever since What's-His-Face did it in that movie. Forgot the name of the movie already. The redesign was not my intention. I said we're going to make some alterations. You can put your stamp on it. And then it was whittled down to about 3 lines I was able to alter. The thing on his neck, a couple of divots in his costume. We know we're not changing Superman's costume very much. And yet here we are. We made drastic changes to it after all. So don't ask me for I honestly don't know what I'm doing. It's a lot like being married. I just follow orders.
Oh, he's a funny guy. Anybody else? One over
Lady
here.
in red. The lady in red.
Young lady. Sadly, yes. She asked, have I ever put a lot of effort and work into something only to it doesn't represent me and my style and then toss it out? And the answer, yes. And
because of somebody else or when you're done with it?
I could have a very bad day where, as you said, you're smart, you walk away. I am a stubborn Sicilian, and I just don't know how to walk away. So I just stand there fighting and fighting and fighting. And so at the end of the day, I'm pissed off because it's not very good, it's stiff, doesn't have the flow, doesn't have any bounce, and it's dead. And my wife says, I'll look at it and go, it's fine, and I'll go, oh, she goes, you're crazy.
I have torn up many a page.
Yes, yeah, no, I'll scrap
screens.
Yeah, I can't have it because it would throw everything off. You'll look at it and it'll be like an awful speed bump. It's wrong.
There's also a worse hell than that. You send the FedEx package out and you wallow in this relief that you're done with the whole issue. And you go, you sleep for a couple hours, you have a couple of glasses of wine, and then you pick up the photocopies. And then you go, ah!
That's when you see it.
Oh God, what did I do? I called Klaus up, don't eat that page, I'm gonna redo this. He said, shut up, I'm gonna do it anyway. Happens all the time. There's a panic that you actually did this. 4 o'clock in the morning, there's always an image. It's a stretch of panels that you can tell when a guy's been working all through the night. You know, a couple of eyes are like this, faces are twisted like this. Always happens, there's that panic. I can't believe I have this sent out. And then of course I get letters from people. You know, Romita, you suck and all that. Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate that.
I've known. Yeah, thanks, Dad. I've noticed a phenomena, and I don't know what it is. Because I tweet drawings a lot. You know, if you follow me on Twitter, right? You see a lot of drawings as I'm going forward, and I'll tweet and I'll take a snap, and I'm smart enough to make sure that it's lined up square, so you get any distortion makes it look crazy, and then I got the photo, I'm ready to tweet it, and I go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. So on the paper, it looked fine. I take the photograph, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I only noticed a little bit too long. You know, so it's this weird thing that happens like post-drawing where you can notice other things, you know, so yeah, I'll see something in print and go, it didn't look like that.
Didn't look, there's another way of doing it. I turn the page around and I look at it with the light behind it, and invariably, a face is not symmetrical. If you take a photograph of yourself and split down the middle and then copy those 2 paths, you will look completely different. So the face is generally asymmetrical. But artists, unless you are Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, who is perfect every time he draws a face, there's always somebody whose face is a little bit distorted on the, I forgot what the chemistry of this is, that half of the face is according to your brain stem, something you can't draw. If you're righty, the right side of the character's face is off, something. So I always flop it and try to adjust it and I try to space them apart. And it's labor intensive, but you'd be amazed. If you measure, I draw left to right. And the left side of a character's face looks great. Right side is short, and you cannot see it unless you pick up a ruler and measure it. There's something wrong. I know.
This is true.
So I try not to do a perfectly straight face on face. I always turn a face away, mostly because I suck drawing faces straight on. Or I have to put up lines. You know, the space between the eyes, the same distance as an eye is, and there's the space from the eye to the ear is this. This is a pain in the ass. Body is 8 heads tall, unless you're a superhero, it's 9 heads tall. There are some moments where you go back and look at it, and I cannot believe this is actually, it got printed this way. Oh God, I suck. Oh God, happens all the time.
My trick, and you're free to steal this, is I keep one of those vanity mirrors, you know. Yeah, I'm pretty, you know, and I hang that right on my drafting table light, and I just swing it around when I want to check something. I just swing it around in front of me, pick up the page, look in the mirror, and I can very quickly check what I want, and then swing the mirror back, make my adjustment, swing it back, check it out again. Looks cool. The thing I'm gonna comfort you about the straight-on face. Here's why. It's not that you suck. It sucks for all of us. We're all bad. And I'm gonna tell you why.
Oh, I have sucked. Excuse me.
The front-on face has no dimension, really, because when you turn 3/4, then you start to have foreshortening and layering because the nose comes in front of one eye. It's just more interesting. To make an interesting front-on face to me is equally a pain in the ass as you just mentioned. And I think it's just because you can't get any juice off it. You can't get as much dimension. Unless you put it in some dramatic shadows and you get some cast shadows going, blah, blah, blah. But really a straight-on face is probably the most boring thing you can draw.
I think we've just been cut off.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. Excellent questions, and thank you for putting up with our bullshit.